Hi. Just give it a few moments here. Great. Yeah, we'll wait till a minute or two after to get started. Let people trickle in.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can get started here. So welcome everybody today to Weight Room, and topic today is building remote teams, and we have Michelle Hayes as well as Nikki Blacksmith, who will be joining us today as experts in the field of HR and hiring folks in this new remote world that we're living in. So we're going to do some introductions on their end and then jump into today's topic. So Michelle, I'll start with you first.
Great, thank you. Thanks for letting me be here today with you, Caitlin. My name is Michelle Hayes, and I started with a growing technology company back in 2017, which is actually where I know Caitlin from. Psychotic Software was about 70 people when I joined, and we went through a couple of hypergrowth years to end up at about 550 employees a few years later when we were purchased and merged with another company. So in that period of time, probably saw all of the scaling and hiring challenges that you could, and really kind of built the recruiting engine and, you know, all aspects of HR.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Nikki, for you, off to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Nikki Blacksmith. I am an industrial organizational psychologist. So what that means is I study human behavior in the workplace and use science to hire, motivate, train, basically anything human capital related. And hiring is one of my favorite topics, so forgive me if I geek out a little bit during this session.
Great. Well, yeah, excited to have you both on and both bringing your extensive knowledge for hiring. So the first topic that we're going to talk about today is just the general best practices of hiring remote. So I think just to note with this topic, it's not whether or not you should have remote teams or not, or in the remote world, is we're just going with that you're going to have remote teams and how to best hire for them, best practices around them, building company culture, company structure, and then how to go about onboarding your new remote employees. So yeah, the first topic we'll talk about, kick it off to you two, is just the general of, hiring best practices for the remote world.
Yeah, how do you get started? Well, I would start high level and say probably the first piece that I would recommend, doesn't matter if you're remote or not, but to your point, the world has changed, and everywhere that we look, we're going to have either a hybrid situation or a remote situation. So HR teams, leadership teams need to figure out how to adapt. But early in the process, when you're, probably for this audience, when you're getting to the point where you're starting to hire people, or you are, well on your way to scaling, the really biggest, most important thing is to have some sort of a planning mechanism where you are closely working with finance, or you are clear about what your hiring priorities are and how those roles really contribute to the growth, because it's amazing how quickly you can start burning cash when you've got duplication of roles, you brought people on too quickly. So really having some rigor around your definitions of what you need. And then furthermore, you'll be the most efficient if you really can get a system down where you've identified all of the duties and responsibilities and a very clear mission for this person. You're going to attract the right people once you get your job description up on job boards, but you're also, really going to be able to explain to them and be clear about what they're doing and how they contribute to the mission. So for me, like sort of that first piece of it, it's almost like if you're a salesperson, you don't ask your sales team to go out and just earn revenue. You've got a revenue plan. You've got a plan like, I know I need X amount of top line revenue. I want it to be segregated by different products or, roles. And, I've got to get X amount of calls out there in order to, so it's really like managing it like a sales pipeline. So I could talk probably more about like those logistical details, but Nikki, let me hand it to you to see if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I agree everything what you said, especially about the key tasks and responsibilities. I think that's one of the mistakes that I see often is people just hire someone because they like them. They think they have the general background, but they don't think about the actual tasks and things that they need to get done. And that is the key to hiring well, is really truly defining what is this person exactly going to be doing, because then you can figure out, okay, what kind of skills and qualifications do I need for these particular tasks? And then I would also add that it's really important to think about hiring at multiple levels of the organization. So one, we talked about fit to the role. So like, are they going to be someone who is qualified to get these tasks and responsibilities done? But then the second level is, are they going to fit on your team? Are you going to work well together with others? And then the highest level is, do they fit your organizational culture and your mission and values? And to think about each of those levels, because if someone comes in and they're 100% qualified for the job, but they're not a fit for your team or culture, they're going to end up quitting and leaving, and that's going to be expensive for, any mishire is more expensive than not having one. I always like to think about using principles of target marketing, basically, like define exactly who you want, what, your audience, what they're like, what they want, what you need, and then go find it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of bringing back in the remote team piece of it too, I think that what we used to get from being in an office and being together was that sort of created, those interactions we had would create a culture, good or bad, but that was sort of something we got from that environment. And it was also a way that we supervise people in some aspects. So really both of those in remote work, what you've got to be thinking about is replacing those things with other things that work for remote. So for example, you're not going to be able to see a person. So you're not going to be able to watch how many hours they work. You need to have metrics to measure their performance. And so really it becomes a mind shift to a results-based kind of situation, which is great and should have been like that all along. But really, it's critical now to be like that. And then the other thing is HR teams are more and more going to be focusing on culture and defining that North Star for people, because they are remote. They're not going to observe that on a day-to-day basis. They're not going to see that. So really defining and inspiring, what are we all about? What do we believe in? And how do we, defining how we do things around here. It's going to be, super important in a remote situation so that people feel connected.
Yeah, I'd just echo that defining is the key piece here. Really have to be intentional about what is your culture. What kind of people do you want in your organization? And if you don't have that defined, you're not going to be able to get that because you don't know what you're looking for. So that definition and that intentionality is like exponentially more important with the remote teams, because you can't just see this, culture and feel it. You have to actually talk about it and say what you want.
Yeah. So in terms of then, kind of thinking, you get to this point where you've hired these people in, and then, a lot of the things that I've been looking at over the last year are things around what kinds of rituals that do you create for the company that enhances their connection. Are they regular meetings? Are they, do you think about communicating in multiple ways, through Slack, through email, through in person, because you have people in so many different areas that you need to kind of hit them with information from multiple places. I think having a central point of meeting, like an intranet or some sort of place where you can post central information digitally, since we're working digitally, is an important thing to consider in managing the teams. So just kind of trying to think of some things, like once you get them on board and you're trying to make remote work, what are other things you can do?
Yeah, I love that piece about the rituals and the norms. I think it needs to happen, especially in the remote world. And you need to think about it. And it can be totally like super minor things. Like my team and I, we set Slack up so it just sends our core values out like every couple of weeks, just to remind everybody, what they are. And we have an icon that we made ourselves, instead of using one of the pre-made emojis, we have one that our team uses. And those are really little easy things, but they definitely change, the feel of it. It makes it feel more personal, and, like you're all part of one thing. So yeah, I double up on the rituals and norms, because those are the little things that make a difference, I think.
Yeah, they kind of stack up at, when it's just, looking at things multiple different ways.
Yep, exactly.
Great. So I got a few questions here. So I think that now that we're kind of just talking about building, kind of jumped into that, but building a remote culture. And Nikki, you had mentioned Slack, and I think Michelle, like some kind of intranet, anything like that. Are there any other tools or ideas that you all have to kind of create company culture, or create kind of, like you mentioned, standing meetings or anything like that? Are there any tools that you all have utilized to help, kind of create a structure there?
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go, Nick.
There's lots of things I can share. I think starting with the definition obviously is key, and then everything you do should support those key values. I think a lot of people misunderstand culture in the sense that they think it means that you're bringing in everybody with the same personality, and that's really not what it is. You're going to need different personalities for different types of roles. What is shared is the values, the beliefs, the mission. Like, where are you going with this company? If the person doesn't believe in that mission, then they're not going to fit in the culture. They're not going to have the motivation to work and fulfill the purpose of the company. So I think starting there and making sure that everybody understands what those shared goals are, and creating a shared mental model around what it is. And then that could be pretty as simple as, posting on your core values on the website and talking about it, what it means in terms of behaviors. Other things that we do, I think, is really important, especially with startups, is documenting the history of the company, talking about why the company got started in the first place, how it happened, because then people start to feel like they're part of a story and part of a larger narrative. And that's stuff that can easily, if you don't start documenting it early on, you forget it, and it just kind of goes by. But the history makes them feel like they're part of something. So documenting history and sharing that, whether it's in an onboarding session, or some companies put it on their website, it's just a timeline of, here's how our company has grown over time. Those are a few things that popped in my mind right away. I'll hand it over to you, Michelle. I can offer some more later too.
Yeah. Well, a couple things I think of. One, there are actually some fairly new tools that support company intranets. And there's one that I did a demo of, and I can't remember the name of it, but if you Google company intranet, usually they charge on a per employee per month basis. So when you're small, it's not, astronomical, but you'll have a setup fee, and it's a nice way to have some sort of central interface that then can lead out to you can have your apps that you normally use. It can lead to your HR system that gives people their paycheck information, or lead out to benefits information, and that's where you can post any company wins or news or things that are you can have really prominently your values. So that's sort of one idea. And if I were going back and doing this small again, I would start there, because we went through a series of Caitlin, I don't know if you remember, we just had SharePoint. And then we had Atlassian, like the wiki page, and sort of nobody really could navigate those things well. So I would set that up better early on, that it was a much more user-friendly kind of situation where you could find things easier. Or it may have just grown into a monster as it kind of grew and people added stuff. So that's one thing. And then there's another tool that we used called Hello Team, and this is a tool that links into your HRIS system. So this is assuming you have one of those, which is a database of all of your employee records and information. As you add new employees, that a record is created, and that would feed into this system. But it's a rewards and recognition system that you can use to share first of all, who is everybody? What does your org chart look like? Sometimes the HR systems aren't good at having a visual interface of what your company looks like, especially being remote where you're not going to see people. Having that, that tool is really nice, where you can have everybody's face up there, and when a new person starts, you can figure out, okay, product management, who do they report to, which piece are they doing? It's a good contextual tool. And then it also had a place where we would give employees a certain number of points per quarter that they could give to thank any person in the team, in their team, at any level. And it's all public, so you can see over and over people connecting for different things, thanking them for working on a certain project. Some people you didn't even know were connected, so it's sort of like this visual representation of the teamwork that's happening. I found it really impactful, to watch it sometimes and be like, wow, there's so much collaboration and teamwork happening. So that was a nice tool to use.
Another really simple tool that you can create yourself is we just have a document that we share with every single person that comes on board, that we call it our core values. And they list the core values, but they list specific behaviors that are expected of the employees, so they can actually see what does that mean in life, and then encourage those behaviors to actually happen, because that's really, I have a funny story about one of our values is just be. We're very focused on people, as psychologists, so we want the person to feel comfortable being who they are. And one of the things that we do with our employees when they come on is you are accountable for making sure this culture exists as well, not just the leaders, everybody is. So if you see something, say it. Anyways, we were in a meeting, and one of my employees wanted to, we were having everybody pick a background that looked, represented who they were, and we were going to take a team photo, and she wanted to put this really sparkly pink thing, and I kind of rolled my eyes oh God, this is not going to look good in this photo. And one of my other employees, stepped up and he said, whoa, hold up, we are about everybody being themselves, and that's not okay. And he was right. And afterwards I actually sent him a message. I was like, thank you so much for calling me out, because I do want everybody to feel comfortable, and that was not I was the one counteracting what I wanted to see behaving. And
and it's good you supported that. You didn't get in trouble for that. You said, oh, you're right, I checked myself there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be hard for some people to admit. Not for me, I'm always making mistakes. But that was I think reinforced it, little the behaviors and the role modeling reinforced the culture. So I think it's really helpful, and my employees we have interns every now and then, and they have commented on the behaviors, because a lot of companies, they just say, here are our values, and it's really hard to figure out, like, what does that actually mean, like, in the workplace? And so having specific behaviors listed really makes it a lot easier for them to figure out what they need to be doing.
Well, and taking that a step further to operationalize it, really those behaviors should be the things you build into all of your HR processes from, I mean, this is eventually, all this is going to sound really scary and corporate-like with, you know, when we're talking about you're just starting to hire. So it's a bit academic, I guess, but eventually you'll build them into, you know, these are the type of people that you'll want to ensure are comfortable in your culture if, you know, and you can ask behavioral interview questions, and, you know, a HR team can help you build those types of questions that would allow you to see certain characteristics in people. And then how do you reward and recognize people? And it should be around, you know, the performance of those types of behaviors. So it kind of all ends up fitting together.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, I thought we had somebody in the queue here for a question, but doesn't look like we do. Oh, actually we do. Hold on one second. Yep. We've got Sean here. Hi, Sean.
I'm Sean from South Africa. I'm actually with Waitrum. Yeah, fascinating conversation so far. I just wanted to comment more than a question, really, is, when we're looking to bring somebody on board, we also have quite a strong culture value section of that interview. So once they go through, the other parts of the interview, the final step is the culture interview, where they get to meet 4 members of our team, randomly picked, with a set amount of questions. The questions would be going through, things like, any struggles they might have working remotely, how they can excel in terms of velocity, candid and transparent communication. All of these things are, we have these question banks that we ask them, and we kind of gauge if this is somebody what we want to work with or not. And they get to gauge if we are people they want to work with or not. But more importantly, also, when we have our all hands meetings every week, there's usually somebody in the team that will, one of the co-founders that will go through, how we communicate at our company and the values that we share at our company. So like Nikki said, you've got Slack messages shooting out from time to time. We get that weekly in terms of one of our co-founders reminding us. So I think it's pretty cool. And I think it's good to be reminded from time to time. And it just keeps the team in check, right? So we've been a remote team for about 2 years now. We've all met each other once in July this year. It was amazing. And I couldn't see myself going back to an office environment. That's the only comment I want to make.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that ship has sailed. We have to just adapt and figure out how we make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, look, the people we've brought into the company over the last few years, or over the last year since we've been doing the culture side of the interview, they've all been amazing. There has been some people that got to that stage that were technically brilliant, but, we just didn't feel as if they'd fit into our culture. And we were honest about it because, we have to leave feedback to the hiring manager once we've done their culture interview. So yeah, I think, that's super important, especially, these days when you don't get to stand around the water cooler and, sit at the lunch table with your colleagues and hang out. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. But anyway, I'm keen to listen to the rest of the conversation and see what else comes up.
I wanted to add something to what you said too. And that it actually, somebody brought this up to me within the last couple months, and I thought, I should really adjust my wording, but around like culture fit at the beginning, because if you're too, they were pointing out, if you're too tight on your definition of culture fit, you could be doing a disservice to diversity when you get down the line if you're hiring people like me. So they suggested calling it culture additive. Is the person going to add to our culture? Would they be happy here, and what could they bring and add? So I thought it made me think of that when you were talking about the culture. And it's
so we've
viewpoint.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got 2 very important things when we hire. One, we always hire up. We don't hire on the same level skills as us. We always hire one above that. And number 2, as you said, we culture add. So we've got an amazing remote team. I think only 2 people share the same country. So, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that diversity. We're looking for that skills. We're looking for, somebody that's got different pronouns to the rest of us, out of the norm or anything, right? That's cool. Because that people learn from that. And I know there's an old saying that goes something like, people buy people like themselves. But what's the point of that? You're never going to expand your mind. You're never going to expand, people in the team. And yeah, anyway, I like what you just said, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so
Cool.
much.
Alrighty, I'll skip myself and carry on with the conversation, I guess. Cool. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Sean, there. Yeah, so I guess we can jump into maybe, we talked about it a little bit, but the next topic being kind of onboarding and what that looks like when you've actually decided to hire a remote employee. What should that onboarding process looks like? Any best practices, tips and tricks that you all have seen?
Do you want me to start with more probably bigger logistical?
Yeah, logistical.
Yeah. I think for us, we, before you get to sort of the more cultural indoctrination, really ensuring that you're providing a smooth process for people, that they've got their IT and their equipment and their account setups all done before they start. They've got all of their benefits selected if they're in a country that has that, or they've provided all the data beforehand. And, you're really making that first day more impactful and not about, admin, and that you're really setting them up to meet with the right people, know where to look for information. They're not going to necessarily remember it. This comes back to that, having that central place that, you're going to forget this, but here's the new hire, onboarding section that you can go to remember. Here's how I file an expense report. Here's who I contact if I've got, an IT issue. So I think we're always thinking about those experiential things, like very like logistically. And then, we'll do like a new hire orientation that goes over those things and usually touches on core values again, and sort of any questions around that.
Yeah, I like that. I think having the equipment and everything first is, if you don't have that, it feels really chaotic. So get that out of the way. One good thing you can do as a founder is like create a checklist of like, these are the things every single employee needs when they come on. So you're not doing it from scratch every single time, and you can make sure, okay, you've got their email set up, they've got their benefits, and just make sure that, you just keep yourself on track to get those done before they come on. I like to assign like homework or like readings. So we'll send articles, podcasts, videos from work that we've done so they can hear our, employees and our co-founders talk about our company. So it really they get like, this is what it's about and this is how they talk about it. And it kind of helps get them up to speed a little bit faster instead of trying to have like explain it, because there's only so much time we all have to sit and talk. And I like having a standardized onboarding deck, like you mentioned, Michelle, like just like have a planned prep, like so you don't have to recreate it every single time, and share the things like values and mission and norms. And you also mentioned the getting to know each other. So I always ask the new hires like to specifically themselves reach out, and it depends how big your team is. If it's 100 people, this is not realistic, but if it's 5 people, like make sure that person get to know each other meetings, like 15-20 minutes with every single person. They have to reach out, so that's not on you as the leader, it's but the employee is still getting that experience, and there's that intentional, like, I'm not going to run into you in the lunchroom, so I'm going to actually schedule a 15-minute virtual call just to say hello and introduce myself and learn about your role so I can see how I fit in the company. And then I also like to have kind of like at least like 2 or 3 meetings for like every week, just to check in with the employee in the beginning, like where barriers or conflicts or things that are you're questioning, because there's usually some things that come up that you just don't think about and they run into, and it gives them time to get to know you a little bit. And then it only needs to happen like 2 or 3 weeks at most, depending on kind of the complexity of their role. But it's nice to reserve that time so that they know that they can have, that like basic, like speeding up and getting on the ramp and like knowing all the logistics of the company and have that time.
Yeah. And then as you grow, another tool you can use is doing some sort of a survey of people at 30 days and 60 days, or, depending on how much data you want to get or how many people. It's nice to give them an opportunity to provide feedback after they can kind of distill what the first number of days have looked like and what they've heard and kind of how they feel about things. And that's really the start of, eventually you'll want to have an HR team or a like HR operations that work on data, and so you're hearing feedback and you're making your improvements based on that.
I love that. I think we talked earlier about setting clear expectations is an important part of bringing people on, but the real critical part of that is to help the employee understand where they fit in the bigger like team and picture. Like, how are they contributing to the mission and purpose of the company? Because then it starts to feel like, okay, now I'm part of something versus I'm just doing some work for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what's the impact of my role?
Right, exactly.
Great. Let's see here. What other topics? So we've talked about the best practices, creating a culture. I guess company structure. So, with building out tech startups, typically it's, smaller companies, 5 people, kind of for your first like few months there. Are there any sort of, now that we've kind of moved into this remote world, are there any sort of, not maybe job responsibilities or positions that companies should focus on? Like, should, there be somebody that's, super into, hosting a virtual, get together every single week? Are there certain qualities or positions, or I'm trying to think here, that, could benefit a startup in a sense? Okay, yeah, sorry.
Actually, we've done some research around this and did just basically studied like what do successful entrepreneurial teams do. And I think there's a few kind of key roles that needs to happen. Usually there's a visionary. That's usually where it starts, so that you don't have to go out looking for that. But there executes and does all of the things behind the scenes. So having the visionary and that person who can execute and implement those things is key. And then also another piece is, like you mentioned, Caitlin, is that socializer, the one that's going to like bring the team together. I'm not that person on my team, so I always have to make sure that there's somebody else who's like, oh, so-and-so's birthday is tomorrow, or, oh, we need to, schedule this team, or, someone that's thinking about the group collectively and like their sense of belonging. It's not everybody's forte, like I would rather work alone and geek out on some data than think about, how am I going to bring this team together? But I do recognize the importance of that and having somebody on my team. And then I think the other one that we really highlight a lot is there needs to be at least one person on the team that is incredibly resilient and optimistic, because there will be rough times when everybody kind of like is frustrated or gets down or there's rejections. But you got to keep going. You can't let that, slow you down. So there has to be one person that's like, okay, that was, we didn't get what we wanted there, but like, here's some really other great opportunities, and let's keep going and just keep that energy, because emotions and energy are contagious. So if everybody's kind of coming down and they're like, that's going to transfer to other people. And then the motivation and the momentum is lost. So having someone on the team to kind of be I hate to use the word cheerleader, but I can't think of a better word right now, but basically that, champion to like keep the team going. That's really key. That's, I think, one unique difference that we see with successful entrepreneur teams is they always have that tenacious person.
Do you think it's helpful to for the team to talk about those particular roles and kind of assign them to somebody. That's the first I've heard of it. That is very interesting, kind of ensuring all of those personas exist. And I would assume different people can take, I mean, some are going to naturally, like you said, you're not the socializer per se, but if you were told you had to be the socializer for a period of time, you could be, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, it needs to get done.
Absolutely. So we do that. We kind of map out everybody, and everybody like usually has a couple things that they're really good at. And so you can, assign them. And, I'm the visionary, the big picture thinker, but I'm not very competitive. And, I don't love thinking about like beating other people, but my co-founder is like, we got to know what the competition is doing. We got to do this, so there's like that strategic, like we hand it off. Basically, we know where our strengths are and where they're not. And I think that's key. And making sure that there is one person on the team that does that and that is assigned that, because otherwise it kind of falls through the cracks. Another thing that I always assign that isn't necessarily part of entrepreneurial teams in general, but just a good team thing, is assign a devil's advocate, because that fosters healthy conflict. Because then it's not personal. It's like that's their job, is to like poke holes in the ideas and avoid the groupthink that might happen with a team. So if you officially assign it, it kind of removes some of that interpersonal feelings when someone's like, that's not the best idea. And so we visually map our team and see, make sure we have pieces.
Do you have any sort of like thing on your website or like an article about that might, or something that could be useful? I wrote down all these ideas, but it's fascinating. I'd like to sort of see it more.
Yeah, I can definitely share with Caitlin and Josh, and then they can share with the viewers and you, and happy to do that. But yeah, I think entrepreneurial teams in general, they're self-managing teams. So there kind of has to be, it doesn't just happen, or, with the structure of the organization, there has to be some intentionality about defining like those key roles and what's important.
Yeah.
Another one too is usually like someone on our team that's like the customer advocate, and that's always thinking and asking about, feedback from the client or the customer, and constantly thinking about, okay, what can we do to improve and make this better? We have a person that we didn't even ask him to do it. That's just what he does, because he thinks like that, which is great. He's, use UX and UI background, but he like builds that into everything he does, is like constantly like thinking about how can we innovate? How can we get better? And I think about that, but I think about it at a much higher level. He thinks about it in terms of like, I think like, what kind of big, SaaS program can we create? And he thinks of all the little features that go into it, and kind of takes it down to a whole new level. And I didn't even realize like how important that is until he started kind of like, we can't lose it. Like, this is so important. And there wasn't someone on our team before that was thinking about those things, but it's so critical, or especially in the early phases when you're iterating new products.
Yeah. Caitlin, does that answer the question, you think, or were you also thinking? Okay. Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just more curious about like different personalities, right? And just hiring off that, you kind of have very high level, but your social person, somebody that's kind of, the total always thinking positively, the cheerleader, and just making sure that you don't have a room full of just highly dominant, same type of folks on the meeting. And I think as Sean mentioned before, right, just making sure that you're not just hiring yourself 5 times over, hiring different people, different skill sets, backgrounds, whatever it might be, just kind of round out that circle that you're creating. So.
You brought up a really good point about personalities. So the best way for teams to start to work together is to start with self-awareness. Like, know yourself and know what you're good at and how others interpret your behavior, because you're going to, interact with everybody a little differently. And you said dominance, and I'm thinking like that's actually a common thing where there's 2 people that have a need for power and dominant like personalities, and they tend to clash. And if you don't have kind of norms or standards to deal with that up front, it can actually create a lot of conflict on the team. So knowing and understanding people's behaviors and their personalities can actually like reduce a lot of that friction. Early on in when I was working with my co-founder, we were having conversations and like it just felt like I was banging my head against the wall, and she was frustrated too. And we're like, why can't we communicate to each other? Like, what is going on? We're using the same words, but like we cannot seem to get our point across to each other. And we started using our personality assessments, and it turns out I'm a very abstract thinker. I think in bubbles and like everything's connected and it's blurry. And she's like very straight lines, linear, like 1, 2, 3. And so we were using the same words, but had totally different like mental like models of what that meant. But once we realized that, it actually like increased our performance, not just fixed it, but like improved it, because then we could say like, okay, you're this type of thinker. Like, what do you think about this? And okay, now we need to like do the logistics. Like you are the person that thinks about, every step along the way. And having an understanding of each other's personality also builds trust in relationships, which can improve performance, especially remotely. Making time to specifically like get to know each other and how they work and how they think can improve the teamwork, because I think that comes naturally when you're in person, because you're going out to lunch together, you're talking about your weekends, but it's really hard to do like remotely because you don't have that time. So you have to intentionally set meetings where you actually spend time to get to know one another. I was working with this entrepreneurial like innovation team. They were going through this program as a bunch of interns, but they actually each took a personality test, and then they sat down with each other and talked about their similarities and differences. And there was a lot of overlap, but there was also like big gaps of like, okay, we're very different on this part. So in a way it provided connections, because they were like, oh, we have similar things, but then it also illuminated some potential conflict or things that could come up on the team by knowing where the differences were.
Nikki, do you have a certain personality test that you like to use? Like I've used DISC, for example. I think we did that at Psychotic, maybe when you were there, Caitlin, but that was really great for me to look at what I'm good at, but also for the people that I hire, that I'm hiring the complement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So personality assessments, that's like my expertise in like building them and using them for hiring purposes. I was at Gallup for a long time on their StrengthsFinder team. So I'm a little bit partial to the StrengthsFinder. I like that. The StrengthsFinder, what's great about it is it creates a shared language. So then you can start to talk and like understand like what's going on in each other's heads. But we actually built our own personality assessment for startups and entrepreneurs, because it is such a unique, you need to have leadership, right? But it's not the same kind of leadership that you have in a corporate organization that's well established with lots of resources. Mm-hmm. So we built one, but it's very typical. I mean, there's not a lot of the personality tests out there measure the same things. We measured the Big Five, for example. That's not brand new. We didn't create new traits or anything like that. The difference is we just helped understand what does your personality mean in an entrepreneurial context, and what traits can you leverage for, which types of tasks that you're doing. So for example, future orientation isn't typically measured on most personality tests, but it's so critical for startups, because they constantly have to be thinking like, what's next? Where's the 20-year mark? What's, coming in 5 years? And people who have past orientation tend to like ruminate on mistakes or things that happened in the past instead of like moving forward. So having somebody on that team that's always like thinking about the future, that's really critical. So we included something like that. And another one that's not often included is uncertainty tolerance, which is so important in a startup team, because there's no structure. There's a lot of ambiguity. The environment is volatile. And so having people that are able to deal with the lack of structure can make a big difference, because the way our academic system, because I teach at American University, and my students always have this problem, is like, if you don't give them like very clear instructions that are 1, 2, 3, they like lose their minds. And so having that practice of dealing with ambiguity and being okay with not having instructions and having to figure out how to do it yourself, like those are the kind of people you need in startups, at least in the very beginning.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and Michelle, you mentioned, sorry.
I was I'll send some stuff and share some more. But yeah, it's just.
I think we're coming up on time. I think it was 45 minutes, not an hour. Is there any last remarks that you guys wanted to end with? Nikki, I know you've got, your business here. So maybe Nikki, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think just the last remarks is that for me and my company, like, people are first. You see a lot of these reasons why companies fail, and it's like product market fit, they didn't have enough funding, things like that. But at the end of the day, like, a person created that product and thought about or didn't think about how it would fit in the market. And so really focusing on the people, like, ahead of the product, because if you have the great people, a great product will come from that. If you have, so focus. Like, a lot of people think that, spending time thinking about your culture and like how you'll fit on your team is like a waste of time, or it's not a priority, but actually it should be a priority, because that creates a foundation for everything else. So I'm just going to end with saying that people are in startups, and people basically are the startup. So put them first and treat them nicely, and you can really increase performance when you really get everybody kind of doing what they do best.
Great. And if anyone wants to contact you, what's the best way to go about
They can
that?
contact me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Great. And Michelle?
Yep. I'm on LinkedIn too. Happy to answer any questions, continue any conversation. This is super fun. So I'm sure we can talk for much longer about any given topic, but it was fun to be included. So I appreciate it very much, Caitlin.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Okay. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.